Hello, today I'm going to be presenting chapter 12 on essay assessment tasks with you. My table of contents or topics that I'll be talking about throughout the presentation are the following 8. There is a lot that goes into assessing essays, so we have a lot of information to cover. 1 is going to be formats for essay items. Our first format type is going to be the restricted response varieties. These limit both the content of students' answers and the form of the response. These items should require students to apply skills to solve problems or analyze situations and include interpretive or context-dependent tasks. These are going to be shorter responses rather than essay responses, maybe just 1 to 2 paragraphs versus 5 paragraphs. We have the extended response varieties. These are going to require students to freely express and organize their own ideas, show the interrelationships between their ideas, and there are 2 broad uses for this format, one being general writing ability, and 2 is the subject matter knowledge. Typically, the restricted response is going to look a lot more at students' content knowledge, whereas the extended response is going to look at both of those main aspects. The writing assessment, though, is going to only assess the student's writing ability. This prompt has to be specific. It needs a topic, an audience, general guidance, and it needs to elicit the best performance from the student because we are only looking at the writing ability and not content knowledge. This rubric must define characteristics and qualities of good writing, and we are going to get to that a little bit later in the presentation. The next writing type or assessment type is going to be the subject matter knowledge assessment. So the evaluation purpose is, are students knowledgeable? Do they understand? And can they reason their understanding? This prompt must set the task. Gives the general purpose of the essay. Advantages to this type is going to be student demonstration of skills and abilities, as well as assessing learning objectives requiring a combination of skills. So that's really important, especially in ELA. But the disadvantages are going to be scoring reliability and validity, and we're going to get to that a little bit later as well. Section 2 is all about the usefulness of essay assessments. So what is quite unique and interesting about essay assessments is that it allows us to identify those higher level or higher order thinking skills that students may have. So some of these types may be something like concept understanding, analysis. So an example prompt is going to be read the attached newspaper article, which statements are opinions, and explain why you think so. So, all of these types or skills that can be assessed have example prompts in our textbook, which are really interesting to look at and help give you a really great basis for when you're ready to write your own prompts. 3, we may be comparing. 4, using principles and rules, so inference and prediction. 5, very similar, a little bit different, but as inferences by making deductions, predictions, and generalizations. An example of that type of prompt would be study the data in the table above. What would you expect to happen to our exports of wheat over the next 5 years? Explain the assumptions you made for your prediction to be valid. And then evaluation. So I have another example prompt of that here, which is use your daily log and records of your plant's growth to explain the present state of your plant. Explain why your plant is better or worse than your classmates' plants, and what could you have done differently? What effect would that have had on your plant's present state? The depth and breadth of content sampling. So, responding to essays takes a pretty significant amount of time. If you consider the amount of time needed for a student to respond to one multiple choice question, you may be looking at 1 minute. We could, students could answer 30 questions multiple choice questions in about 30 minutes. But in that same 30 minutes, they may answer one essay type question or one written response question. So a possible resolution to this issue may be to assign some out-of-class essays collected in portfolios to best assess learning objectives. Now, this would be throughout a unit, not a week or just one topic, but it would be maybe throughout a grading period to really assess those learning objectives over time and how students, because student knowledge evolves as they continue learning. So that would be a great way to determine that type of student understanding. We also have the influence of scoring criteria and exemplars, which is huge. When students know what to expect or what their teacher is looking for, it makes a significant difference in the outcome of their written responses. So on that note, essays require well-defined criteria. Students need to have that criteria when they get the prompt. They need to know exactly what their teacher is looking for. What do they need to score 100% on this essay? And obviously, a lot of times that comes in the form of a rubric. Second is going to be that we as teachers need to collaborate with other teachers. Are we scoring essays the same? Different things like that. Do we have the same rubric? Are we scoring reliably across the board? And then we need to share quality exemplars with those collaborative teachers as well as with our students. So students learn what quality performance looks like from these exemplars. They need these exemplars to be successful. Now, I'm not saying give them the prompt and then give them the perfect essay that maybe you wrote on the same prompt. That is not at all what I'm implying. It is maybe give them a different prompt that is similar and a perfect response that would elicit, 100% of the grade is going to really help them. It's going to build their confidence. Oh, yeah, I can do that, things like that, and give them a really good idea of what they need to do to be successful. Section 3 is constructing essays, assessing subject matter learning. So how do we assess subject matter learning, right? There is a giant checklist for this. It is 10 items long. And I do find that all of this information is absolutely pertinent to creating quality assessment types as far as essay questions goes. And I think this is a checklist that all teachers should go through at least once when writing a prompt. And so that is going to be the homework, which I will talk about at the end of the presentation. But be familiar with this 10-point checklist. So number one, and ideally you would have your prompt in front of you as you go through these numbers, but number one is, does the essay assess an important aspect of the unit's instructional objective? In other words, is it relevant, right? Two, does the essay match your assessment plan in terms of performance, emphasis, and number of points? So if it is highly relevant, obviously we're going to give that 4 points, not 3 or 2 or what have you. Number 3, does the essay require students to apply their knowledge to a new or novel situation? Number 4, when viewed in relation to other items on the test, does this item contribute to covering the range of content and thinking skills specified in your assessment plan? So a lot of times we backwards design, should be every time, right? We create the assessment and then we start from at lesson 1, right? Building towards this assessment that we've created. But we also create an assessment plan, right? What do students need to know to be successful on this assessment? So, in other words, does the essay prompt align with the assessment and the assessment plan? Is the prompt focused? Does it define a task with specific directions rather than leave the assignment so broad that virtually any response can satisfy the question? I think this is an issue that a lot of educators have come in contact with at least once is not being specific enough in a writing assessment prompt. We need to work on that. I think everyone across the board. 6, is the task defined by the prompt within the level of complexity that is appropriate for the educational maturity of the student? So obviously, if you're working with 6th graders, your assessment may be your task assessment may be a little bit more analytical rather than, in 3rd grade, can we identify something or can we recall something, right? Number 7, is the student required to demonstrate more than recall of facts, definitions, lists, ideas, generalizations, etc.? Again, that's going to apply to the higher grade levels. In 3rd grade, I think if kids are recalling in an essay type assessment, I think they're doing great. Number 8, is the prompt worded in a way that leads all students to interpret the assignment in the way that you intended? So again, don't leave those assessment questions broad. Be specific in what you want them to do. 9, does the wording of the prompt make clear to the students all of the following? A, magnitude or length of the writing. So are we writing a paragraph? Are we writing an essay, poem, etc.? B, purpose for which they are writing. C, the amount of time to be devoted to answering this item. So obviously, if this is part of a test, they're going to have, maybe 75 minutes. They're going to have to determine, like, okay, if I have 10 multiple choice questions, then I need to give myself at least 40 minutes on this writing, right? And then D, basis on which their answers will be evaluated. Again, students need to be very informed on that criteria or that rubric that they are going to be judged on. And then 10, which is the final check, if the essay prompt asks students to state and support their opinions on controversial matters, does the wording make it clear to the student that their assessment will be based on the logic and evidence supporting their argument rather than their position or their opinion that they take? So we're not grading them based on their opinion, right? Whatever, their opinion is their opinion, but is there evidence and their reasoning appropriate to back that up? That's what they are being assessed on. And I tell my students in ELA all the time, you're not necessarily wrong if you have the evidence and reasoning to support your answer. And that always gives them this little light bulb moment, like, really, I can't be wrong? And it's like, I mean, loosely, you can't be wrong. Can you support your answer is what I'm saying. Section 4, optional questions. So this short, quick section here. So optional essay questions. Some teachers believe that offering students a choice is going to allow the student to put their best foot forward. However, research does not support this belief, and often students end up choosing questions that they're not doing as well on. So if you think logically about this, all the questions represent important learning outcomes, then it's fair to hold these students accountable to answer all of these essay questions. But if a teacher is willing to choose this strategy, then it's probably better to assess the student on their general writing ability rather than a content-based type prompt question if you're giving them an optional essay. Section 5 is constructing prompts for assessing writing achievement. So general suggestions for integrating writing assessment and instruction. Obviously, we need to focus on qualities of good writing. Now, how you word that is entirely up to you. Possibly it comes from your district or whatnot. But what are the writing traits or the writing dimensions? Are you teaching what good writing is, right? Are you teaching them what those traits and dimensions are? Are you teaching them the criteria? Are you giving them feedback? If the student doesn't know what they did wrong, how are they going to fix it? Are we going through the writing process with the student, right? So you get the prompt. Are we expecting the student to write 5-paragraph essay in a day? Ideally, no. We have an entire writing process. So you've got the pre-writing, the brainstorming, right? Like, what are we going to write about in response to this prompt? You've got your draft, you've got the editing, well, the peer review, or Maybe it's not a peer, maybe it's a parent or whatnot. Feedback from this review. What can be changed? What can be better? What doesn't make sense and needs to be reworded? We have the revising and the editing stage, which you can repeat multiple times. You can repeat that peer review and that revising multiple times. And I always tell my student, get at least 2 or 3 peer reviewers. I'm giving you a class period to do this. It's not going to take you that long to read one person's essay and give them some feedback. So read at least 2 more people's essay and give them some feedback. So repeat that a few times, revise, edit more than once. I want to do this over a period of several days because every time you come back to this and you look at it with fresh eyes, you're going to see something else you can fix. And then finalize that project, right? That writing. So finalize what you're working on, get it into however your teacher wants you to turn it in, type of format, and finish it up, wrap it up. But with that said, that's part of just teaching what good writing is. Good writing doesn't happen in a day, and students need to be aware of that. But on the same note, we need to define the standards or level of achievement for students within these writing prompts. So they need access to that rubric. They need to know what these writing traits are, and they need to be clearly defined. And these definitions of these good writing traits need to apply across all those different types of writing. So whether it is a narrative or an expository essay, what is good writing should apply to both of those types of writings. More general suggestions here. Elements of prompts. So students in the prompt need to be given this information. What is the subject? What is the occasion, the audience, the purpose? That has an acronym and it's SOAP. So students need to know the SOAP, their role as the writer, and then the form. So are they writing a poem, a paragraph, an essay, right? And when students know this and they know the criteria and they are very well informed on what is expected of them and what they need to accomplish to achieve that A or 100%, they will be a lot more successful. They'll have a lot more confidence in themselves as well. Writing prompts for different genres, like I was just saying, we have those different writing types. So we have the narrative, which is typically a personal experience of some sort. Imaginative, the use of creativity. So that's going to be like our fiction, fantasy type writing. Expository is going to be an explanation of something, and that's going to be kind of like our nonfiction. And persuasive, where we are trying to convince the reader of something. And so students need to know what type of essay they're writing, and that is going to give them the highest possibility for success. But scoring essay assessment. So we talked about this previously in the class, and we all said that, scoring essays is a very subjective thing. It depends on a lot of different factors, mainly the person who's scoring the essay. So some suggestions for scoring essay questions. 1, prepare a scoring guide. So you as the teacher or the person scoring the response, write the ideal response. What is the best possible response to this question? Have that prepared, have it next to you as you're grading these essays. 2, grade all responses to one question before moving on to the next. So, okay, like I said, if we have essay questions attached to tests, which most of the time they are, but sometimes we have standalone essays that we do a lot in ELA. But you'll have some questions, right? Multiple choice, fill in the blank, whatever. And then we've got maybe 2 to 3 written response questions. The idea here is that you score writing question number 1 for every student, and then you go back and score writing question number 2 for every student. Don't score 1 and 2 per student. Score 1 for everybody and then 2 for everybody. So we'll talk about the reason why later, but that is a tip there. 3, periodically rescore previously scored papers, and that's just to make sure that you are maintaining your integrity as a scorer. Uh, 4, score penmanship, general neatness, spelling, use of prescribed format, and English mechanics separately from subject matter and correctness. So basically what this is saying is a student can have absolutely terrible grammar, horrible handwriting, this, that, and the other, but they know the content. So is knowing the content the more important thing? In social studies, absolutely. I teach social studies and ELA. In social studies, we have no area on the rubric for any type of grammar error, written errors, things like that, spelling errors, nothing. It is doesn't exist. It is, does the student know the content? So score that separately from all those other factors, right? If the student knows the content, that is meaningful. That's what we're looking for. But then when we get into ELA, obviously we need to be spelling words correctly. We need to be using mechanics properly, subject matter correctness, verb tense, different things like that do need to be correct. And those are traits or things, characteristics that apply to those good writings I talked about previously, and that students need to know, right? They need those exemplars to know what is good writing. 5, I do this often, score papers without knowing the name of the student writing the response. There's a reason why, we'll get into it later, but this is helpful and it may pleasantly or unpleasantly surprise you once you put a name to that score that you scored, again, anonymously. 6, provide students with feedback on their strengths and weaknesses. Again, if students don't know what they did wrong, how do they know how to fix it? They don't. 7, when grading decision is crucial, have 2 or more readers score the essays independently. So if this one essay is going to be the difference between a pass or fail kind of situation, you want to grab another teacher or somebody around who is capable, who is knowledgeable, and see if your scores are matching what their scores are based on your rubric. Scoring reliability. So this is where we're going to talk about kind of like what I touched on in this previous slide. So have consistent standards. All teachers are using the same rubric. We have what is known as rater drift. So the rater or the person scoring the essay may not be paying attention to the criteria or interpret them differently over time. Now think about if you've been using the same rubric for 5 or 10 years, you might be at the point where you're not even reading the words on the rubric anymore, you're giving a number. So it happens. We drift. We're not perfect. Teachers are not perfect. We make mistakes. We need to mitigate that though. And the way to do that is to go back, score an essay you've already scored, and see if your previous score matches up with the score that you would give today. The halo effect. So I talked about this previously. And this is why we want to grade essays anonymously. So student scores may be based on whether the teacher's admiration or lack thereof for that student may it affect their grade, right? So you know this is a great student. You know this student participates in class. Obviously, we know these kids. We are with them day in and day out. But maybe the day that they finalized their writing or the day they took this particular test, it was an off day for them. They did not do their best work. But we know this kid. We know this kid knows this information, right? This content. I'm gonna give her the 4 or him the 4 rather than the 2 or the 3 points that it actually garnered based on the content that the student wrote. So halo effect is real. It happens. We all like to say we would never, but that's why grading anonymously is the way around that. The carryover effect. So is why I explained earlier to judge or grade question 1 for everybody and then go back and do number 2 for everybody. And that's because what you score, what that student did for number 1 may affect your judgment on what that student responded for question 2. So take it take it how you will. But it also does help to keep me mentally, like what am I looking for specifically? And that kind of goes back to that Raider drift of making sure I'm looking for the right criteria as I'm grading these written responses. Section 7 is writing, assessment, and technology. So, as we all know, we've had a huge shift in technology, and I don't know, maybe the last 2 decades, big things have happened. We have the internet now. 2024, we have AI. So you give AI your prompt and let it write your essay. I mean, I've never experienced any positive outcomes with that personally. I find I'm a much better writer than ChatGPT, but students aren't, young students, they're not there yet. So they're like, oh, yeah, this is a great essay, right? But besides that, there are some positives to this. So students could include pictures or images with their written responses. We make a lot of presentation slides, which are fun and include audio and video clips. Book reports can turn into Amazon product reviews. Like, that's so cool to me. I think that's so integrated into our new technologically based society. Um, it makes learning relevant for them. But it is difficult to separate the use of media from the actual students' ideas and content that they know, which could be the drawback to some of that more fun stuff. And then we have the automated essay scoring. So one of the still to this day most commonly used ones is Project Essay Grader or PEG, and that was created back in 1966. We have so many more, and they have several advantages and disadvantages. Advantages being efficiency, right? You have 100 essays to score, like that's going to take a significant amount of time, especially if you're looking to give every student individualized feedback and different things like that. It's really rough to grade 100 essays. So these automated essay scoring programs can give us that efficiency, can give the students immediate feedback, and it's practical, right? Like time is money. I have other things, I have other lessons and other tests that need to be graded, so it would be helpful. But the disadvantage is that it only focuses on that final written product. So like I talked about before, we have that entire writing process, which is days and days of work that students put into these final products. As the teacher being in the classroom, we see this, we see those evolving changes in their writing. But these automated scoring programs only see that final product. So they don't see that the journey that the student has taken in order to get to that final product. And then the English language, as we all know, is highly complex. And is a computer really better at scoring this? The jury is still out on that. So as far as the 8th edition of this textbook, which was published, I think in 2019, the research is still out on whether or not the computer or the human scores more efficiently. So they did determine, though, researchers did determine that we are scoring similarly, but who or what is scoring the most accurately is still under research at this time. So conclusions and homework. As far as conclusions, grading essays is it's a tough gig, and we have a lot of challenges we need to overcome with that. However, having a reliable rubric, having very defined and well spelled out criteria for your students when they're given that prompt, writing prompts even with very specific subjects and audience and purpose is going to make writing for the student a lot easier. It's going to make grading it for the teacher easier, more efficient, and having that rubric is going to make the scores more valid. And for homework, so using that checklist, that 10-point checklist, which I know is very long, is very complex, but so is writing an essay prompt, and so is grading an essay. So the work put into that should also be complex and should consume some amount of time. But using that checklist, I would like you to evaluate one of your essay prompts that you have given or you are giving to your students and see, does it check out? Is it a valid prompt? Is it going to elicit the response that I want my students to come to, or the interpretation I want them to come to based on that? So I'm going to drop that in the comment below. I'll also attach it in the forum where I'm posting this link. But that is all I have for you today. And again, I did not deviate from the textbook. I felt the information there was very pertinent and helpful to all educators in determining their, validity and whatnot of their essay responses. I appreciate you for watching this whole video. Drop a comment if you find it helpful, and I will see you maybe in another video. Who knows? Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're watching this. Thank you.